Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. You may remember this article from earlier this year. I made a video about it on March 1st. This is from SciTech Daily. Once in a lifetime viewing opportunity. Nova explosion. New star in Northern Crown. Now, this isn't going to be a new star, but from our point of view, it's going to look like a new star. And here's an animation of what's going to take place. You have this red giant star and a white dwarf that orbits it, and it's about to go nova. And at the time that we read this, they were saying that this was going to take place anytime between February and September of this year. And as you can see, in just a few days, it's going to be September. So there's this new article from Israel 365. Scientists expect Star of Jacob to appear this month. So this is really interesting timing. It could have happened before this point, but it hasn't. President Nelson is about to celebrate his 100th birthday. We've looked at all the things surrounding President Nelson and his presidency. There have been signs in the heavens, specifically with the blue moons that have coincided with lunar eclipses and being supermoons and so forth. So this may be just another thing if it does happen in September. Okay, so this is by Eliyahu Berkowitz. He's the one that I've interviewed a couple of times, most recently about the red heifers, because he's in contact with the people at the Temple Institute. But let's read and see what he said. Because, again, I think it's important to see how Jews perceive things, because I think the Lord is working with them and getting them ready for the second coming according to their own understanding. So that's one reason why I follow Israel 365 News, is because they cover things that other people don't. Things that Jewish people may see as a sign. They've done so many articles about those type of things, and this is one of them. So, okay. Scientists predict a nova in the star system called T Coronae Borealis, or TCRB. And by the way, Corona Borealis, that means Northern Crown. And in this video, I covered the potential significance of that. It's a crown, right? When Christ comes, he's going to be crowned. He's going to be king of the world. Now, the constellation that this is in, okay, so here's Polaris, right? The Northern Star. And down here is the Big Dipper. Okay, so if you go to the handle of the Big Dipper, and then you go up into the left a little bit, here you have Corona Borealis. Okay, so this is the constellation, or this is the part of the sky that you'd be looking at. But the constellation it's named Northern Crown. Okay, will be visible to people on Earth in the next month. TCRB will appear 1,500 times brighter than usual, making it the 50th brightest star in the sky. Okay, so don't expect something that's going to be like this huge, amazing phenomena. It's just going to look like any other star, but where it's currently at, it's going to get brighter. So right now it's really dim, but it's going to look like there's a new star in that spot. This nova may just be the Star of Jacob Balaam, described as presaging the appearance of the Messiah. Okay, he's referring to this scripture right here, Numbers 24:17, and I've got this pulled up. I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheth. Now, of course, we would recognize this as referring to Christ, and in the King James Version, it has star capitalized as though it's like a title. When you click on the footnote, it takes you to topical guide, Jesus Christ, prophecies about, right? So the Jews are right. It is referring to Messiah. It doesn't seem like it's referring to an actual star, but this being a title or a symbol of Christ. I wanted to just double check the Institute student manual to see what it said about this verse and, this chapter in this story. It says, "It is difficult to determine from the record whether or not Balaam was a true prophet of God holding the powers of the priesthood authority. He lived in an area known as Aram, probably named after the son of Kemuel, the grandson of Nahor, a cousin of Abraham. Haran, the place of Abraham's first settlement after he left Ur, was a seat for the worship of Jehovah and was also in Aram. Therefore, Balaam could have been one of the few scattered people, such as Jethro, who held the priesthood and exercised its power. The Bible suggests that he had a true knowledge of God and was susceptible to revelation from him. Regardless of their origin, the Lord raised up inspired men to all nations." And then later on, it says, "One of the remarkable things about Balaam's blessing of Israel is the messianic promise of Christ." All right. So it is interesting to note that's how we would interpret it, right? As the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But if the Jews view it in this way, then, the Lord can send a message to them in this way. If they're thinking about this scripture and it's like, this means that Messiah is going to appear, they think that it's like a literal star that's going to appear, then so be it. And they'll find out the truth later. The point is that they're getting prepared for the second coming, right? Okay, continuing. A nova is a temporary brightening of a star before it fades again, not to be confused with a supernova, which occurs when a massive star explodes at the end of its life. TCRB is a binary star system made up of a red giant and white dwarf. They orbit each other every 228 days at about half the distance between Earth and the Sun. In this case, the Earth-sized white dwarf is slowly stripping hydrogen away from the ancient red giant. Once enough hydrogen accumulates on the white dwarf, the growing pressure and heat trigger a thermonuclear blast visible from Earth. Okay, so let's go back and let's visualize this. Let me open this up in a new tab. So essentially, this white dwarf is taking this material from the red giant and, it's accumulating, it's compressing, and the pressure is going up, and it gets to such a point where it causes a thermonuclear explosion. And that's what you see happening here. Okay. So let's go back to this. And by the way, I feel like there could be some symbolism behind that. If this is meant to be a sign of the times, I mean, we already have this whole thing with the Jews potentially looking at this as a sign that Messiah is about to come. And then this star is in the Northern Crown constellation. So we already have a couple things going on there. But another thing that this made me think about is this. So we're looking at my quotes, common misconceptions spreadsheet. The topic is timing of the second coming, and the misconception is we have to be righteous enough before Christ will return. So let me just read maybe two of these quotes that I have. This is from Doctrines of Salvation, Volume 3. This is President Joseph Fielding Smith, at the time president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He says, "When we become ripe in iniquity, then the Lord will come." Okay, so you have this situation where the pressure is going up. You have more and more iniquity. It reaches a threshold, and then that's when Christ comes, when the world is ripe in iniquity. So I feel like that could correspond pretty well to this. You have this situation where, the hydrogen just keeps accumulating and it's more and more and more. And then it gets to a certain point where it explodes. Okay, let's get back to this. "I get annoyed sometimes at some of our elders who, when speaking, say the Lord will come when we all become righteous enough to receive him. The Lord is not going to wait for us to get righteous. When he gets ready to come, he is going to come. when the cup of iniquity is full. And if we are not righteous then, it will be just too bad for us. For we will be classed among the ungodly, and we will be as stubble to be swept off the face of the earth. For the Lord says, wickedness shall not stand. Do not think the Lord delays his coming, for he will come at the appointed time. And then Bruce R. McConkie backs this up. This is from Millennial Messiah, pages 26 to 27. The time of the second coming of Christ is fixed and certain, as was the hour of his birth. It will not vary as much as a single second from the divine decree. He will come at the appointed time. The millennium will not be ushered in prematurely because men turn to righteousness, nor will it be delayed because iniquity abounds. However, it will happen at a time when the cup of iniquity is full. So it just kind of made me think about that. Let's get back to this article. TCRB is one of 10 recurrent novas recorded that erupt on timescales of less than a century. On average, TCRB undergoes a nova process once every 80 years. Now, here's another potential symbol, and this made me think about the curse of the 8th decade. So, the last time that this one exploded was 1946, which was just a couple years before Israel became a nation. And on my spreadsheet called Quotes, Rising Generation, I have columns G and H dedicated to the age of Israel. The reason why is because that could play into the timing of the second coming. In fact, next year, I think it's kind of interesting because next year, Israel is going to be 77 years old, and there could be certain implications to that. But recently, we've talked about this idea of the curse of the 8th decade. This is a belief held among rabbis and Jewish political leaders. And I'm just going to read this from the Jerusalem Post. This was published May 1st, 2023 by Shalom Solomon Wald. The name of the article is 75 Years Old is a Dangerous Age for Israel. Opinion. Okay. A few weeks ago, when speaking of Israel's 75th anniversary, President Isaac Herzog worried whether the state would reach 80 years. The precedents, he said, were not encouraging. Of the two Jewish states of antiquity, one split into two parts that never reunited. So, of course, that would be the Northern Kingdom and then Judah. And the other lost its independence. The united monarchy of Saul, David, and Solomon is said to have lasted not much longer than 100 years. The Hasmonean dynasty ruled in real independence from 140 to 63 BCE, when Pompey occupied Jerusalem, 77 years. Both were ruined, not by foreign enemies, but by domestic infighting, comparable to the events of today. 70 to 80 years, plus or minus 2 or 3, has universally been considered the lifespan of 3 generations. Their sequence is thought to follow a regular pattern. The first generation creates, the second maintains, the third or fourth destroys. And then you have this article from Middle East Monitor, and it just talks about the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has talked about the curse of the 8th decade, and Ehud Barak and Naftali Bennett, all of which have been prime ministers of Israel. So it's something that they actually take seriously. So if we have this star, this white dwarf that's about to go nova, and it's been 80 years, I don't know, maybe that kind of coincides with the age of Israel. I don't know. It's just another thing to consider. TCRB was first discovered in the fall of 1217 by Burchard Abbot of Erzberg, Germany, who recorded, quote, a faint star that for a time shone with great light, end quote. Observations during its past two novae in 1866 and 1946 showed that TCRB became slightly brighter about 10 years before the nova was visible from Earth. After brightening, the light from TCRB briefly dimmed, indicating an eruption before September 2024. Well, we do have a couple more days before it's September, but at this point, it looks like September is probably the best candidate. Again, interesting because of President Nelson's birthday. Astronomers predict that the next nova event will occur between February and September. Scientists are excited as this will be the first outburst since modern spectroscopic observations have been available. During the next nova event, TCRB, also known as the Blaze Star, and here's another interesting aspect to it. I wanted to look up the definition of blaze, just to see like exactly how it's defined. And in Merriam-Webster, they say an intensely burning fire. Intense direct light, often accompanied by heat. And then C, in active burning. Well, we know that one of the main events of the Second Coming is that the world is going to be cleansed of wickedness, and it's going to be by means of fire or burning. So here's yet another potential symbol of this event, the Blaze Star. The Blaze Star in the Northern Crown constellation. And the last time that this happened was just a couple years before Israel became a nation. It's interesting stuff. But there's more. Okay. Is expected to jump to second magnitude, making it similar in brightness to the North Star, Polaris. I think that that's interesting too. Polaris is a star that's been talked about a number of times by prophets and apostles. In fact, I have this picture that I took back when we lived in downtown Salt Lake in the avenues of the Salt Lake Temple. And on the west side, on the central tower, you'll notice that they have a depiction of the Big Dipper and the North Star. That's on the Salt Lake Temple. Okay. And of course, the point of this is the North Star, not the Big Dipper, but the North Star. I have a quote from the architect of the Salt Lake Temple. Let me zoom in. Truman O. Angel. And you can find this in Millennial Star, May 5th, 1874. The name of the article is The Salt Lake City Temple. So this was put out before the temple was completed, but he was describing what the temple was going to look like to the British saints, so they could kind of know what to expect. And he went into very great detail, but he did talk about the Big Dipper and Polaris and why it's on there. So on the west center tower, a few feet below the top of the battlements, may be seen in alto relievo or relievo Ursa Major, commonly called in this country the Dipper, with the pointers ranging with the North Star. Moral: the lost may find their way by the aid of the priesthood. And I need to create a new topic for the North Star, because I know that President Hinckley would talk about it from time to time. It seemed to be one of his favorite little things that he'd share. But I think the North Star, it can represent a number of things. In this case, the priesthood, but because it stays in the same position, like from our point of view, it remains constant in that it's not like the other stars. Like, let me do this. Let's go to this. When you progress the clock, you'll see that all the other stars move around except for Polaris. Polaris stays in the same spot. And so that's why it's called the North Star, right? And so I think that's emblematic of the gospel, perhaps of Christ, that he's unwavering, he's sure, he's solid, it's a solid foundation, that kind of thing. You could also maybe see it as God the Father, because this is the star that's at the top of them all, so to speak. I'm not talking about like in space, just from our point of view. Being the North Star, it's like above the other stars. And so if you have another star that's about to be similar in appearance, similar brightness and similar in appearance, and it's going to be in the Northern Crown, maybe this is like God the Father, and this is like Jesus Christ coming to the bride, coming as King of the world. So I feel like all that together, it's perfect. Okay, so continuing, it could be visible to the naked eye for several days, and potentially visible for over a week through binoculars before dimming and returning to obscurity. The next nova for TCRB is not expected for another 80 years, making this a potential once-in-a-lifetime astronomical event. Okay, now we're going to read just a little bit more. This is from Ephraim Palvanov, a teacher and author who writes the blog Mayim Akronim, which means final waters. All right, he says, we know that probably one of the oldest prophecies and traditions about the Mashiach, or Messiah, comes from Balaam, a Gentile prophet, which that's their point of view. What we just read in the Institute manual is that he could have been a true prophet. We just don't know. And he may not have been, Gentile, so to speak. But all right, so from a Jewish point of view, a Gentile prophet who came to curse Israel, but couldn't curse them. Instead, he gives a prophecy that actually says, I will tell you what will happen at the end of days. It's one of the few places that the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, it's one of the few places that the Torah uses the expression end of days. Balaam says that he's looking far into the future, and he prophesies that a star will emerge of Jacob. Of course, Christians adopted this in the nativity scene and the Star of Bethlehem. Yeah, so let's go ahead and go back to Numbers chapter 24. And now let's look a few verses before the one that we read, verse 14. And now behold, I go unto my people, come therefore, and I will advertise thee what this people shall do to thy people in the latter days. So it is really interesting. It's interesting to think about. Again, I don't know that this is necessarily, whenever this happens, I don't know necessarily that this is prophecy fulfilled, because like I said, it seems like when you read here, when you have star capitalized, it's just referring to Christ in a symbolic way. But so I don't think that this is like specifically prophesied, but it could go along with it. And either way, it's a wonder in the heavens. I've done videos before pointing out that in the Book of Mormon, a lot of times you'll have the phrase signs and wonders. A lot of times people think that it can't be a sign unless it was specifically prophesied. And that's not the case. The scriptures just generically talk about an increase of earthquakes and wars and rumors of wars without specifying, specific earthquakes. Except for like in the case of, when Christ comes to the Mount of Olives, but it's not just talking about that great earthquake, right? Or pestilences and plagues. So, but the Book of Mormon talks about signs and wonders, and this definitely is a wonder in the heavens. So I'm just taking note of it. I think that between all the different things that we talked about, all the different symbols that seem to go along with this, I would take this as a sign. The timing of it is interesting, so we'll just have to see how things play out. But that's going to be it for this one, so if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.